Hi there, how's it going? This is Leon Ross, and in this video I want to show you a very interesting concept within Ableton Live about how to create a sound using purely stock instruments and audio effects within Ableton to create suspense and tension within your film. So this is intended to be within score, within sound design, but something really interesting and different. I taught some of my composer students in film scoring how to do this technique, and it basically amplifies the tension of a scene without you even noticing, because it happens in a sub-audible, like subterranean sort of way. So I'm going to show you this. If we go over to our main view where our timeliner is within Ableton, we're going to drag the operator to a blank MIDI channel. It will sound like this. Now in the operator, operator is a synthesizer inside Ableton. You have the option to change the pitch based on courses and not semitones. It's a bit different in this. There's volume of your individual oscillator or operator, and then your output volume here. Now, in this output section, we have the option for these oscillators, these sounds, these 4 different ones, to be actually sending into each other or to be functioning separate to each other. Now, for this example, I want them to actually be frequency modulating, to be feeding through each other. Basically, like the sound is, any component of the sound is routing to each other, creating more frequency complexity. Now that might be a lot to understand in the beginning, but it's something I encourage you to experiment with, as it's a very versatile and interesting concept. Great, so now what we're going to do next, we're going to just take this note. So we're going to look at course here. This is our pitch, but we're going to click this button, which says fixed. Now fixed actually changes your particular note you're playing to just a single frequency. Now this is really cool because it means I can set this to be, say, 50 Hertz or, 1500, and any note I play will be just that frequency. Now, this depends on how you want to build this, because if you want this to be pitched to a certain frequency, you can do it this way. If you want it to be pitched to a musical note, you can turn fixed off and have it as a note you press. For this, we're going to put it on fixed and choose the frequency 100. For this, we're going to actually choose 50. It's better. Nice and low, very subaudible. We're now going to select a range of 16 bars and press Command-Shift-M. Now that is also Control-Shift-M if you're using Windows. And the grid size is very, very small, so I'm going to right-click and press Narrow, and that allows us to have an adaptive grid here. Now it doesn't actually matter what note we put in here because it all automatically maps to 50 Hertz, right? So if I click this button, just middle C, easy. Then, this is where it's really fun. I can press fixed and change this to, say, 20 Hertz. And then the more I bring up the volume of this, it's going to be feeding 20 Hertz into 50 Hertz. Now the only difference is that we have a ADSR here, a envelope. We need to make sure that this is constantly at full volume at all times. Otherwise we'll hear a peak and then it will come back down. So this we'll get a very fast oscillation because we're hearing 50 Hertz and 20 Hertz put together. So actually, if we make this lower, say 10 Hertz, this is creating a manual effect of what a low frequency oscillator is. In a synthesizer, we have LFOs. LFOs are essentially what we've just demonstrated. We have a very, very, very low frequency and that's being fed into the volume or the frequency, can be routed in that movement to any parameter. In this case, it's to pitch. But you can do it to a filter or whatever you need. This is where it's really interesting because we can now make sure we got M turned off for this MIDI keyboard button, M turned off, A for automation, and we just click on the level, and then we want to make sure at the beginning of bar 1 we have no volume, and at bar 16 we are at full volume. This will slowly start to accelerate and have more and more frequency modulation happening. Eventually. Very cool. Now, something we can do next is we can put a third oscillation in. Make sure the envelope is on full. Already we're getting really cool results. And we can even automate the fine tune of this oscillation as well. So it becomes even more out of pitch. And we're getting some very wonky, strange results. You might identify this as sort of like this woody texture here. And that's just a result of what sine waves sound like when they're feeding into each other with this frequency modulation, FM. So some other interesting things we could do. We could turn off the filter and bring this volume up to 0. I know it's going to be very loud, which is why we need to put on something that limits the volume to not surpass 0. So what I can do is go inside the audio effects here and choose something called a limiter. Now this is getting very loud. That is intended. The next thing we can do is some creative color within our sound. So for example, what I love to do is use something here called overdrive. The benefit of using some of the Ableton effects here is that you can use it almost like an EQ for the specified effect. So this graph here is about where the effect is placed within the frequency spectrum. So if I decide I want the distortion to only be happening in the middle frequencies, then I can choose here. You drag it down for more narrow or up for more width. So if we have it on 0, we're going to get more and more intense effects. So interestingly, if we have so much volume pumping into this limiter and this overdrive, it's going to affect the actual color of the sound. It's going to create soft clip compression, soft clip distortion. So we can be very calculated about what we want here. So if we do set this to -12, you'll hear it's less distortion. And the more we increase, the more soft distortion we're getting. Now we can try and find the middle ground here, but -12 seems to be good. And what I can also do is slowly, maybe about bar 5 up to bar 16. And we can choose the area of the frequencies that we like the most. So we could go down here, up here. This is very subtle. Let me just also show you everything that's happening so far. We have our, let's go first to oscillator A. We have the oscillator A just turned on entirely all the time. Then we have oscillator B doing this. Then we have, that's actually a very nice feature. You can go show automated parameters only. So then I can go here. That's the one we just did. Then there's C frequency and C volume. Is that right? Output volume. And then also this overdrive dry wet. Now, cool. Let's do some crazier stuff because this is pretty basic, but it's effective within a scene. You would have something subtle like this. But let's take it further. Let's see what else we can do within this. Now, I love this plugin called Erosion. Erosion superimposes a level of noise or also frequency modulation, but we're going to choose noise over also an area of the frequency. So we can choose more high frequencies, and the width here is about how much frequencies it's being used on. So what I can do is very slowly, I can click amount, and then already that's very powerful. Step further, multiband dynamics, OTT. If you haven't heard of this, look it up. This is multiband compression, but over the top multiband compression. We can also automate the dry wet. A lot of these parameters we're doing from no effect to full effect. We'll bring down the high frequencies, bring up the mid frequencies, bring up the output, crunch it because we've got a limiter safely. Great, so we've got this crazy evolving sound already, and it's very complex, very nice. It's got lots of different characteristics. Great, what do we do now? Well, two things. We could freeze track like this, print it into audio, new audio track, Command T or Control T, depending if you're on Windows or on Mac, and then we just simply drag down to the channel. This is what we've just created. You could do that, or you can create a new audio channel, Command T, then input it from resampling. Resampling takes any sound or any kind of source, so anything that's coming through your master channel is put into the input of this audio. So it means if you've got live instruments that you're playing on the keyboard, or you've got a sound like this that you need to print very quickly into audio, you put this into resampling, you turn the record button on, and you simply hit record. And here we are. Great, so I'm not going to do that because we just did the exact same thing with freezing. But say if I had some mastering effects, like some extra compression or something like that, and then I put resampling on an audio channel, that effects from the master will be printed into the audio. Cool, so mute the original, let's use the audio. Now we can take a very close analysis of this. It's a very perfect sine wave that gets faster and faster over the duration of this. And it gets more and more complex because we're introducing noise and we're introducing a different frequency. But as it begins, it's purely just 50 Hertz. Great. So I want to show you something a little bit crazier. So what I like to do here is I like to do something called parallel effects. We can do that by adding a audio effects rack. This allows you to have something called chains. Chains is essentially a single lane, an effects signal flow, but it allows you to have parallel chains, meaning you can have two separate different lanes of effects that are happening in parallel, meaning in isolation to each other. So this is our original, then we can have a second one, and that can be whatever effects we want. So this first one, I'll just rename as original, so it's nice and clear. Second one, I'm going to do as effects. Now I'm going to solo our effects and put on a reverb. So just a very simple reverb here. Now this, I'm going to put on 100% wet because this is a full effect. It's kind of like a send, like a bus send, but it's all implemented into the channel. So we need to make sure we're going to cut the low frequencies because they're very strong. Same here. But what's really good about this, and you'll take note that this is all in the 50 Hertz area. So how do we have frequencies to use in reverb if we've just cut everything out before reverb? Well, we can do some kind of harmonic generation where there's extra harmonics added. We can do that by overdrive, saturation, anything like that. So let's use a saturator and just put that before the reverb. See, we're doing everything within this effects. If I go to original, that's just the blank original sound. Effects, here we are. So if I turn this off and I go like crazy think I'm going to turn the reverb on until we hear something. There we are. And I can go even further. I can actually crank up that distortion over this duration.
I lost most of my hearing and my left leg.
I also have to compensate the output. Good. We're going to bring down some of the high frequencies. Now, interestingly, what I like to do next is I like to have a gate on this. Then I put sidechain on and input it from the channel where we are on. It means when I let go, the signal is muted. The signal stops. Which means I can make things as complex and as long and as crazy as I like. I could have the decay at 60 seconds, a full minute, and the moment I stop, it stops. And that's due to this gate just closing itself, turning everything off the moment it's finished. So let's have that superimposed underneath this original. And I'll start bringing up the volume as we get. Yeah, that's pretty wild. Now, once we click freeze again, we can create a new audio track, bring that down, and we've got our final idea. Here it is. Great. Thank you so much for checking this out. I really appreciate it. Hope this helps. This is just some interesting ideology and methodology I like to think about when I'm working on a project. If there's a suspenseful scene or you need things to be subliminal and within the, like beneath the surface of a scene where it's not noticeable by the audience, but you're planting in all these tones and these textures that helps to dramatize the scene. This is an excellent option of creative methodology. Something that Mick Gordon said once, and I want this to be carried through this video. If you change the process, you change the outcome.
Through distortion. I mean, that's not really amazing. I'm a guitar player and made a living out of doing that exact thing for about 10 years. But what I needed to do was change the process, right? Change the process, change the outcome.
By doing new, interesting things through choices and decisions and creative paths that you don't normally do, you get very fascinating results. So if you haven't used Ableton before, give it a try. If you haven't used Cubase before, give it a try. If you haven't used Logic, Pro Tools, Nuendo, anything. If you haven't used some interesting synths or whatever around us, try something new and you will be amazed by the amount of creativity and just adrenaline and interest of new things that you come up with. So change the process, changes the outcome. So thank you, Mick, for that awesome quote. All right. Thank you, everyone, for watching this. I'll see you in the next video.